Welcome, everyone, to the Unshakable Courage Show. My name is Kim Glass, and I am your host today. This show is focused about helping people face the reality of any fear, release that fear once they find out what the root is so that they can live with power in their life or their business. I'm so excited today that you have chosen to join us. We're continuing our conversation about irrational fears and how that irrational fear may be holding you back again in your personal or your business lives and accelerating your goals for you and your family. Did you know in a recent survey, even prior to the pandemic, 84% of people hold on to an irrational fear that's keeping them awake at night and unable to achieve those goals. If you're working in a team, you may not understand when someone is not in on the project or whatever the circumstance may be. If you're an entrepreneur, you may not understand why someone is not calling you back. Those are the things that impact us along our journey. And those are the irrational fears that we're going to be talking about today. I'm on a mission, and the purpose of this show is to help others break free and move through any fear with courage. I have some exciting special guests that are joining me today on this show. And what I've enjoyed about this show is meeting people along the way that are open to sharing their story to help and impact other people. Do you ever hear someone's story and think, how did they do that? How did they get through that fear by moving through it with courage and be who they are today? So I'm excited to bring on two special guests today. Let me bring them in, Tanisha Coffey and Kohila Silvas. I'm so excited to have you both on the show. Welcome. So, Kohila, can you share with us a little bit about you and your backstory of what was that fear, either in your personal life or your business, that you finally realized was holding you back?
Thank you for having me today. My fear, I think there's several points in my life that I had been overcome the fear that I had. So the first one would be that when I moved to Canada when I was age 6, I just completely shut down because I thought in order to protect myself from judgment of not knowing the language, I would not speak to anyone. I would just shut myself down. So for until I went through elementary school, and just when I got into high school, until a teacher noticed that I'm not speaking in class, and she made me, say the first word out loud and get me to stand up and, just start speaking. I just held myself with that fear of judgment that someone's going to say something. I'm sure nobody would have said anything. They would have understood that I'm a young person. I should just speak and learn. But it was something that I put on myself, and I held myself that way for a long time. So I muted myself all those years. Then later on, as I got into my teenage years, my life got really bad because my dad became alcoholic, and there was another abuse in my life. So what along the way, I just decided that this was the end of my life. I don't want to live anymore in this world. So I tried to kill myself, and I didn't succeed. So that's why I'm here today. So that part, when I did that, and what I got out of it is that suddenly I felt like there's a purpose for me to be here. Why didn't I go that day, right? Why am I here? So then what I did is I started focusing on school a little bit more. I thought I should give more time. Like, why am I avoiding everything? So even though life at home wasn't really great, let's just focus on school. And the subject that I started focusing on was math. That's where I felt like I could do something. So as I started spending more and more time, there was a quote that there's a lot of posters that were hanging in the classroom during that time, and one of them was from Albert Einstein, which read that it's not that I'm smart, I just spend a lot of time with the problems. So that kind of stuck with me, and I realized that I've never spent any time with problems. I just tried to get out of them like trying to kill myself was one of the ways I tried to do it. So since that day and weeks went on, months went on, I just started spending more time with math. And I found math to give me this inner confidence that I never had. Like, because every time I was able to solve a problem, it felt like, okay, if I can solve this, I can solve more problems. So I started falling in love with it, and eventually started getting better grades in it. And that was another point in my life where I proved to myself that I can do things. It was very important for me at that stage to prove to myself more than anyone else, because I think I had this very bad critic inside of me that kept telling me to not to do things, or you're not good at. So it was my inner voice that I had to work with, right? So the math became therapy for me from that day on. I succeeded. And then I've started asking myself, after getting that success, why is math not being taught this way? Why is it being taught so complicated? Like, since ever since I started spending time with it, it seems so beautiful and easy. But when teachers presented, it was so hard. So I said, okay, when I grow up, I want to be a teacher. I want to share this with other people. So I continued to hack math, just made it simple for myself and got really good grades. And then fast forward to when I graduate, I said, I'm going to start, I want to be a tutor. I want to start being a tutor. So I started off becoming a tutor and working in a classroom as a teacher assistant. During that time, I started a kind of develop own coaching process. So what I have now is a math. My business is called Math Codes. So I combine the hacks that I've developed during my struggle to learn math together with a coaching process, and I have this unique method which is called Math Codes method, and that's what I share with my students, and I have been doing that for 22 years very successfully. And then 5 years ago, me and my husband started training teachers and tutors with the same method, so they can start their own independent coaching business and use the same method to deliver successful results for the students. So when starting the business again, because I'm so critical internally, I started fearing about, showing up on videos was a big deal for me, right? Overcoming that, or public speaking, or, saying something out loud, because I did mute myself for so many years. I could go back into that protected shell, right? But I had to overcome all of that. So, you learned, as you say earlier, you were saying about how you have your own journey. You have to find ways to overcome your problems, right? So I have certain things I started doing that helped me: meditation, writing, journaling, to clear my inner voice. I think I had to develop my own cheerleader in my head who would say, go, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. So since the day of all the abuses to this day, that's what I do every day, is to say, you can do it, the inner voice. So that's kind of what my story is. Thank you.
Wow, Kohila, you spoke about so many incredible things along your journey. I just want to take it back to the fear of judgment. We see that, we hear it, and yet, you know, where that fear of judgment was leading you to, um, in your personal life, like to end your life. I've gotten to know you the last few weeks, and I'm like, wow, I so admire what she's doing in her business, but I'm always like, what's the backstory that led her there today? And like for me, it's like, oh, the fear of judgment, and then how that fear has propelled you, to get into math. I'm from Texas, so I always say it's too hot to math. So I admire people that get that. And I find it so inspiring that, even that fear of judgment, and the things that happened along your journey, your path got directed to an area that, you could feel good about yourself. And so share with us, like, through your journey, and what you're doing today. When we think about fearless entrepreneurs, what is maybe one tip that you could share with our listeners here today that would really empower them? Like, it doesn't matter what we're facing, like, we all have these fears, these irrational fears that are maybe not even true, but they're playing over and over and over, and we're being programmed by them. I'm interested in finding out, what is one tip that you could share with our listeners today to help them if they're feeling that fear of judgment?
Thank you. I am a master NLP practitioner, so language programming is huge. Like, what I work with my students is particularly on that. Believe it or not, a lot of people come to me for math help, but I'm like, it's not even math, it's the language that's the problem, right? Because if you hold beliefs like, what I used to hold, like I can't do this, people are going to judge me if I get this question wrong. And math is not forgiving. Like, you can easily see you got it wrong. If you don't get the right answer right away, it's wrong, right? So it's a wrong and right situation all the time. So it's a very I would say cruel subject in that way, right? It's not forgiving at all. So I think the advice I would give is what I was able, how I overcame all of my struggle is by changing that inner dialogue I had. It's so important. I don't even think it was other people that were doing anything to me, but I was way really creative in creating these stories, that I would make up all these stories and they were playing like very nicely to tell me that, okay, they're going to judge you, don't speak, be quiet. And I muted myself for so many years, and no one told me I couldn't speak. Nobody ever came to me and said, don't speak because you're going to say the word wrong. Nobody told me that, but I kept telling myself, right? It's just me telling myself over and over again. So what helped me along the way is figuring out a phrase. Like, for example, for me was like, always I said, you can do it, you can do it. Every time that critical voice came, I would cut it out or shut it down by saying, no, you can do it, you're going to do it, you're going to do it. And along the way, and I share that with my students and the teachers I train as well, is that you have to have some kind of a phrase, or you can call it mantra or whatever you want to call it, that repeats, and that becomes the voice inside of you. Every time it's going to come, that critical voice is going to come and say, you're not good at this, or you're not, who are you to say this? Even that comes up a lot for me too, right? So to shut that down, you have to have something. So whatever it is, for me it was always, you can do it, don't let this go, you can do it, just try it. Anything like that, that would be my tip for anyone listening, is to have something like that, that you can be your own cheerleader.
I love that. And it's so true. You were talking about judgment. Isn't it interesting that that judgment is so, it comes to us like it's so absolute.
Oh,
It has to
yes.
be right or it has to be wrong. And what I love helping my clients with is understanding, number one, we're all perfectly imperfect, and not
Yes.
everything is black and white. Not everything is 100% to 0%. And I think that's where a lot of people that I'm talking to, I often say we get into this mental court. And in that mental court, exactly what you're talking about is where we start that self-doubt and that judgment. And we sometimes we bring that on ourselves. And so thank you so much for sharing that. I love how you're talking about, you know, being your own cheerleader. Sometimes it's easier for us to cheer for other people, but we have to always cheer for ourselves. And so I love that analogy that you gave. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. And then I want to bring Tanisha on and have you to share with us, what is the backstory that you have felt about an irrational fear, and how has that shown up in your life?
For me, the irrational fear is that has been most repetitive in my life is probably has to do with fear of not meeting expectations, and specifically expectations from like my immediate circle, kind of the people who I was raised around, um, you know, because I've always kind of ended up doing things differently. Um, so for instance, when I even became an entrepreneur, it wasn't something that I was originally planning on doing. I became an entrepreneur out of necessity. I had, finished college, I had finished a post-grad program, and in my world, that was the narrative. Go to college, get an additional degree, or a certificate or some sort, go get a fabulous job in corporate America, make money and live, the good life. Unfortunately for me at the time, there was some shakeups going on in the advertising industry. I had graduated with a certificate in advertising copywriting. And so where I was trying to get a job, I had all this extra training on paper. I had everything I was supposed to have in order to get that corporate job, but that's just not how it was panning out for me. And so, at the time, the fear that was going through my head is, oh my goodness, I've racked up all these student loan bills. I have, an apartment I'm renting, all this. I'm living off of student loans. I don't have a job. I don't know how much longer, this money is going to last. I have to figure something out. And so the fear was that people were going to look at me like I was a failure because even though I had all these things lined up that were supposed to, equal this corporate job, I couldn't get one. And so that was the start of it. And then the next one was, okay, well, what do you do? Because, you can only put so much time into things. So I was, constantly day in, day out, sitting at my, in a chair. I had an office kind of set up in my apartment. I was sitting there day in and day out, applying for jobs, and it wasn't working. So then at some point I had to make a switch, and I say, okay, do you keep doing the thing that's not working, or do you try something else? Well, that was scary to try something else because I was fearful of what people would say. Because for me, that something else was if I can't, if nobody's going to hire me, I'm going to hire me to work a job for them. They can hire me by me being my own boss, by me becoming an entrepreneur. I paid all this money to learn all these skills, and I'm darn good at it. So, I need to put it to work. So that was another fear of how people were going to look at me going into entrepreneurship and not into, like I've had people in my family who are entrepreneurs, but they were part of a franchise, so it's an established business, model and things like that. They weren't just on their own. So there was that fear, of those expectations, what are they going to think about me? And then, what if I can't hack it? Because now I'm trying to divert my attention to trying to get people to hire me in a different way. But either way, at the end of it, if I don't make money, either somebody hiring me for a corporate job or somebody hiring me as an entrepreneur, I'm going to end up back home with my mother. And I love my mother to death, but that wasn't the plan. That's not how I was raised. That was not the expectation of what I would do. And especially after I had gotten all this education and everything. So that was truly scary. And then just kind of working through that for me. At the time, it was more so the notion of, okay, you can keep doing what you're doing, or you can try something else. And the reality was that I kind of processed everything. The way I got through it was I said, you don't really have very many choices here. So you have to do something. The worst case scenario, which is what I process, is worst case scenario. Fortunately, I have a mother who loves me and who could take me in if I needed that. I wasn't going to be homeless and destitute and starving or anything like that. The worst case scenario was I end up moving back home with my mom. So, sometimes I think with fears is you have to kind of go down that rabbit hole and say, okay, if this happens, then what's going to happen? Okay, then if that happens, what? And you keep working your way down until you get to there's no more things, whatever that worst thing is in your mind that you're thinking could happen until you get there. Because then it's like once you've processed all those things, you of course don't want those things to happen, but having processed them makes them less fearful because it's almost like you've literally planned out worst case scenario. And so even at that, once you hit that bottom, you can say, okay, well, if that thing does happen, what am I going to do then to solve that problem? And so that's the way I kind of go through life. I mean, there are still fears that I have to this day, and that will pop up. And even some of those same fears I just told you about. But at the end of the day, I process them differently than when I was younger, when they would first hit, and I process them faster. I kind of work through a process of, being fearful. Then I have an acronym called FACE, fear, FEAR, face everything and rise. So that's kind of the mentality shift that I make, where I go ahead and face everything, then I fear less, meaning I have less fear of whatever I am facing. And then eventually I'm able to move and become fearless because I've worked through all the fears of it and I'm able to go and drive and move forward.
Wow, what a powerful story, Tanisha. And what I loved about what you said is the fear of other people's opinions. Isn't it interesting that even the fear of other people's opinions can sometimes be so prevalent, and yet those people may not even know what we're doing? They may not, they may not even know, or we may not have even voiced what we're doing. And so I love how you shared that. And I love how you shared that peeling of the onion and processing that through, because I've seen with my clients that are trying to get to the bottom of that onion by getting the root. And that's what we often say about facing the reality. Like, is this irrational fear even true? And you have to peel that onion to get to the core and decide, okay, if this is true, what's the worst thing that can happen to me? So I see people peeling the onion. And then I also talk about how some people aren't quite to the level or to the area to peel the onion. And so what I see is they have like shopping carts stuck together, like at the grocery store, where that fear is sticking in every piece of their life. It's not staying in that one area of fear. And I find that so fascinating. In my own journey as a fearless entrepreneur, um, I've always, and I didn't realize this for a lot of years, I was able to compartmentalize a piece of fear in my life, because in other areas of my life, I was able to self lead myself, even through change, even through a challenge. And I find it so fascinating how some people can peel the onion in that one area and get to the root. And then there's other people that shopping cart it. So I'm interested, Tanisha, what do you see, maybe for yourself or your clients? Do you see more people peeling the onion, or do you see things that are layered on top of each other? So it's that fear is stretching into other areas of their life.
I think with most of my clients, it's more of a shopping cart scenario where they kind of have a group of fears, like several fears, and they don't realize that some of the times they're compacted and they're connected, or sometimes it's just literally helping them to remove that first one, which allows the other ones to then be released. And so I think that's probably what I see most. And typically, it's again, my process is I kind of walk them through the scenario. Okay, well, what if? Well, what happens then? And what's next? And if that happens, what's it going to be? And again, once they go down that, they tumble down that rabbit hole, they're able to say, okay, that's not the end of the world. It may not be what they want. It's not their best scenario, but at the end of the day, they realize, okay, that's not what I want, and they can then work harder at whatever they were trying to do to avoid that absolute worst case scenario. And usually it results in them having more drive. And that's again part of what I do. I let my fears be my momentum. Once I get past, once I kind of process the reality of it, then I let that be my momentum to motivate me to not reach that worst case scenario. And if I do happen to reach that worst case scenario, I'm able to then look back and say, it's not because I didn't try. It's not because I didn't do the things. It's not that I didn't avoid it. I didn't try to avoid it. And so that's how I usually kind of help my clients as well.
That's so great. I love how you said, face everything and rise. And from our conversation today, it's not that you just say that, and not just how you help your clients, but that's actually how you have, like, I'm listening to your story, and I'm listening to you saying that fear, or that feeling of fear, whether it's true or not, it is a motivator for you to rise in your personal life. So thank you so much for sharing. And then Kohila, can you share with us when you're dealing with your clients and you're in your math tutoring and all the great things that you're doing in that math language, what are you seeing with your students or clients that you are tutoring as it comes to fear? Are you seeing the onion analogy, or are you seeing more of the shopping cart?
It differs from students to student for sure, but it is accumulated, right? Because as you know, math is a subject that builds on every grade. It goes up in complexity, and if a child starts struggling from a young age, they just start developing this negative language that it's something wrong with them. They can't do it. They never really ask, because they're so young, they never get to feel it or ask this question, is it just me, or is it could be the way it's being taught to me?
Mhm.
Right? It's how I'm receiving the information. It's not suited for me. It's not the So that's where I start my coaching process from, is to figure out where did the problem actually started, like what made you believe that you can do math, and where is that? And that's through, as I say, math is a therapy, and the coaching process that I've developed also guides me to talk to my students, where they're able to go back and really pinpoint, okay, this is what happened, and this is the time I started saying this. And is it because of the teacher or the classroom or another student, or is it just because you saw a couple of tests and you didn't do well and that's it, and you thought, okay, this subject is not for me, right? It could be simple as that, or worse, as someone saying you're really dumb, don't even try. Like I hear a lot of sad stories, like when my students open up and tell me. So I think it is just the subject is, as I said earlier, like it's not forgiving, because you can see either you get right or you get it wrong. There's only two answers, right? It's either right or wrong. So it's a constant. If you keep getting it wrong constantly, how are you going to feel happy about yourself, right? You're going to start doubting your ability, right? So that's why math is kind of a hard subject in that way. But when you pass that, and when I show my students, it's not you, this is the way you can think about math, and changing the language, and getting them over that initial fear of it, they see it, that it's not math anymore, it's not them anymore, it's the way that it was delivered. That's why I always say, if you provide the student the right environment and the right instruction, anyone can learn math. And that's what I tell them all the time.
I find that so fascinating what you shared, because when I think about fear and I think about irrational fear and helping clients, I often try to take them back to, where did that start in your life? And what you just said about math, like I could literally go back to my high school years when our family was going through some things not brought on by our family, but outsiders. And I know for myself, that's when I was like, oh my gosh, I can't math today. Like I can't get any more in my head, because I already have so much mental court going on in other areas of my life. But I find that so interesting when you were talking about that, Kohila, because, sometimes we have to stop and go back of, okay, where did I pick this up? And oftentimes we don't even realize that we've picked up an irrational fear from someplace else, and that pattern of doubt and that pattern of fear and that programming just is playing over and over and over. So I find it fascinating that we can go back to the place of where that set in, and sometimes people know that there's an irrational fear, they just can't finger point it because they haven't stopped to think about, where did this come from? And so we adopt those patterns and that programming until we push up enough against it. It's like, you know what? Why am I having this irrational fear? Like, I'm over that.
Mhm.
But I find it interesting what you're talking about, even in the language of math. That is so powerful. And with your expertise and your training in NLP, I'm always fascinated about patterns. Like, I see patterns, and I've seen patterns for as long as I can remember. And then it's so interesting how those patterns start directing us and driving us. And oftentimes, more than not in a path that we don't want to go, but we're just so conditioned to go that path. So I so appreciate what you shared about that, because that is so critical when you're talking about irrational fears, to get to the root of it, to go back. Where did you first start feeling that? So thank you so much for sharing your insights on that. I'm sitting over here taking notes, and just thinking about, where did my math issues start showing up, to where I was like, I can't do this number thing anymore. And so I love when we can have these conversations and get little nuggets of information that really help us reflect on, where did this fear come from, and how can I turn that off and start reprogramming something different. I think we have so much power in us, and that is also another fear, the fear of success. And so thank you for sharing that. Now, Tanisha, I'm going to go back with you. I'd love for you to share with us and our listeners, what is your business and how are you helping your clients today?
Thank you so much. So I am a business strategist. Well, my business is The Lofty Entrepreneur. I go by The Lofty Entrepreneur as far as my brand goes when I'm assisting business clients. And I'm a business strategist that focuses on helping my clients to monetize, streamline, and cash flow their business. And I go at it from an action-oriented perspective. So sometimes I'll partner with business coaches. Business coaches work a lot with clients on the mindset that they need to be in order to move forward. And like we're talking about today, to kind of move those fears out of the way, or whatever barriers are in the way. And then, but I focus on literally helping them to take the actions to reach critical milestones so that they can move from one place in their business to the next, with the goal always focused on tasks that are going to help them to be in a better position to be able to monetize their business in a better way. And so I work with all sorts of small businesses, but it's a lot of times I focus with solopreneurs and like one to two to three people businesses, a lot of service professionals. So if you're in that situation and you're ready to kind of move your business forward in that way, ready to take action, then I would love to speak with you guys. I'm Tanisha Coffey, aka The Lofty Entrepreneur, and you guys can find me on social media everywhere: Facebook, Instagram at The Lofty Entrepreneur. I'm Lofty Boss Lady on Twitter. I am Lady Legacy on Clubhouse. And then, of course, you can also go directly to theloftyentrepreneur.com. And where else? Oh, I have my own podcast. Oh my goodness, I'm forgetting. So I have the Lofty Entrepreneur podcast. You can find that on Spotify and Apple and several other platforms. And I also have a YouTube channel. So I am everywhere. So if you just put in Tanisha Coffey, that's TANISHA, last name Coffey, COFFEY, and just look for the Lofty Entrepreneur.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tanisha. So our listeners, make sure that you connect with her. She's everywhere. I just heard a whole repertoire of where she is. So make sure that you connect with her out there. And then Kohila, if you will come back on and share with us, what is your business and how are you helping your clients today?
Thank you. So I have two businesses. One is for parents and struggling math students. That's called Math Codes. So that's MATHCODES. And if you want to reach me there, it will be mathcodes.com. That's for parents if they have any struggling students and who would like not tutoring or homework help, but coaching. So my business differentiate way different than tutoring. It's not tutoring. We don't I do help them with homework and getting them done, but they do it on their own. After we work with our students, they get to do their work. We don't sit and do it with them. So it's a total independent, they become independent learners. So this is very different from tutoring. So that's for parents. That I've been doing for 22 years. So that's a business on its own. Now, for the past 5 years, we've been training teachers and tutors to use Math Codes method. And this year we are certifying them. So if there's any teachers or tutors interested in wanting to more information on that program, the certification program, they can go to mathcodes.com/coaching. And that would be for any tutors or teachers wanting to be certified under Math Codes method. And I am also everywhere. My name is Kohila, Kohila, last name Sivas, and I do have Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. So, but mathcodes.com would be the best place to go and find out more about Math Codes and all the stuff we do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And our listeners, I just want to let you know that these two incredible women that you have heard from today are in the Fearless Entrepreneurs book that just launched this Monday, along with over 20 other authors. So if you're interested and you've been inspired today by these phenomenal authors, make sure that you go to thefearlessentrepreneurs.com to check out their website. And what I love about what our mutual connection, Linda Sunshine West, who spearheaded this project, set up, is that all of the net proceeds from the Fearless Entrepreneurs book go toward lemonadeday.org. It's a nonprofit that helps children learn about entrepreneurship and setting up their own lemonade stand. I don't know about you, but I had that lemonade stand, and I had a lot of friends in our neighborhood growing up that we worked our lemonade stand. And so I'm just so inspired to have met you both today. And then I want to also give a special shout out. That book launched this Monday, and you both are #1 best-selling authors from being in the book. So I want you to unmute your line, and I want to share. I want you to share with our listeners, what does that mean to you? Is this your first #1 best-selling book as an author? Just share some of your backstory with us. Tanisha, can you kick us off?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you so much. So I am not a first-time author. I actually have 2 other books. They're also on Amazon. One is called The 30-Minute Startup, and the other one is called $100 Branding Your Business on a Shoestring Budget. And so this is my 3rd book that has been, published on Amazon. However, this definitely is my very first #1 bestseller. So I am super duper excited about that. It was, this book, let alone that goal, wasn't even on my radar when I came into 2021. As you can hear, I have children, so I had enough on my plate. So writing, a book was not something that was on my radar. But I met Linda, and she's so passionate about what she does. The book, what she was trying to do with it, resonated. I love that we're donating to the nonprofit. And so I was just excited to become a part of that book. And then the icing on the cake was just that we did hit that, bestseller status. And not only that, but #1. And we held it for more than one day. I'm not sure where we're at today, but I know we held it for more than one day. So it's awesome.
That's so great. And I love that you have your own cheering section back there. I'm sure they heard me mention that you are a #1 best-selling author again. So
Always.
Tell me what your chapter is. What's the title of your chapter?
So my chapter is, like I was talking about in my in my earlier part, it's fear, FEAR, fearless, and fearless. So that is the name of my chapter. It's named after my process.
Oh, that's so awesome. And I am so honored to have met you along the way. I know we've been on various other podcasts today, and I just thank you so much for sharing with us today. And then Kohila, what does this best-selling author mean to you? Is this your first best-selling book? Share with us.
Yes, it is my first #1 best-selling book. I do have 2 books that are going to be coming out in the next few months, but before that, I was able to become #1 bestseller in this book. But what this book did for me mainly is it's a big alignment for me, because I've been, when you're an educator, you keep your personal story separate from what you do, right? So you're like acting as 2 individuals all the time. But this book, this chapter has merged them. So now I'm finally able to be myself. I shared with the world my true story, where I came from. So I think that that's the amazing that just happened this Monday. Like, even that is a fear for me, to tell my story, right? Like, all these years, I don't tell a lot of my background stories, where it all comes from, because I'm a professional. I don't share that side. This is my personal. But this book just made it so aligned and unified. So I'm so excited. And on top of it, I get to be #1 best-selling author. So awesome. Thank you.
That's so great. I love your stories in there, and I know my books are on order. I got the ebook on Monday, and I'm just reading through, and I'm just like, to have met all of you along this journey has just been incredible. And I haven't quite got to your chapter yet, but I see you in the table of contents over there. And so I'm just so honored how you shared today. Your journey is such an inspiration of where you came from to how you're serving other people. So thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So be sure and tune in to us next time. We're going to continue our conversation about irrational fears, hear from a couple of other of our special guests, and how did they overcome that to be who they are today. So the Unshakable Courage Show, we're all about providing insights, tools, and support resources to help you on your unshakable courage journey, because I am on a mission to help people live in unshakable courage and to live fearless. Again, thank you so much for being with us today. We'll see you next time on our upcoming show. Thank you. Have a great day.